So, I think the remarks I have to make, I think, are, I'm hoping contextualize the work that cyber infrastructure researchers do that is a slightly different view than what Preston gave. And I think Preston laid out resources and how they facilitate faculty research in ways that's super compelling, and I'm quite impressed by that. These people are highly skilled and they participate in research, and that research is generally under the umbrella of cyber infrastructure. So I'm involved in one of the AI institutes, National Science Foundation funded $20 million AI institutes, that's anchored in the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure of the National Science Foundation that is working on advancing cyber infrastructure for AI. So what I'm going to talk about is, the work that I do as a faculty member, my colleagues such as Preston and Carol and people here, advancing research that becomes the next generation software that researchers use to carry out their research, both locally and nationally. So that's the context. And I'm talking about equitable use in that context where AI is key. So this is with thanks to PhD students and others that are critical in my success. Talking about how we envision the work that we do, and there was a conference recently that talked about the common good and what is the common good, whatever these public resources that we all depend on. Well, one would argue that the access program that the National Science Foundation is funding, which provides national cyber infrastructure for our use, and the conversations that are going on around a national AI research resource constitute a common good. We are all in our development, and when I say we, I mean I'm considering myself a cyber infrastructure researcher, are contributing to building out that resource. And what is the responsibility that we have, not only to the researchers that will use this infrastructure, but to society that will benefit or not benefit by the work that we do. With respect to the work that we're doing in AI, we're federally funded. We are completely at the headwaters of research in AI and pushing AI into infrastructure and whatnot. What responsibility does that have? We use ChatGPT. So we talk about misinformation. We use ChatGPT. Okay, people are talking about using ChatGPT as conversational interfaces to our computational resources. Well, Stack Overflow, where people record questions about programming and go to get advice on programming, Stack Overflow took a stand and said, you will not use ChatGPT to post any of the content that you post on Stack Overflow cannot be from ChatGPT and can't even be, reworded by ChatGPT. And the reason they're giving is the posting of answers created by ChatGPT and other generative AI technologies is substantially harmful to the site and to users who are asking questions and looking for correct answers. So when we decide to experiment with ChatGPT and put it as an interface in front of our access to some of our systems, we are taking on some of the misinformation issues that are, I'll skip this because I'll come back to this, that are basically are becoming quickly characterized as a misinformation miasma. So this is the kind of responsibility as those of us that are doing research in cyber infrastructure we have to take on and take seriously. I mentioned EU. I'll come back to EU's AI Act because it's a framework that helps my thinking, though it is obviously applicable to Europe. So the context that I'm working in, have been working in within the last couple of years, is this intelligent cyber infrastructure with computational learning in the environment. It's called Icicle is the project. It's led out of Ohio State. I'm one of the PIs on it. I gotta say we're 2 years in now, and I'm particularly looking at issues of AI democratization and. Arguably with good reason, because it is the tagline for the Institute. So if Icicle is developing cyber infrastructure, for national use, and it is democratizing AI. Well, that democratization needs to be serious. So we're taking it very seriously. So the Icicle project, some of you may be familiar with it. Again, it's been around for a couple years. I like this slide only because it captures the different dimensions of it. Down along the bottom, it's the continuum. It's the HPC cloud edge device continuum. So it considers the ecosystem across the infrastructure ecosystem across that spans. Targeting, at least initially, the discipline areas along the right-hand side: smart food sheds, animal ecology, and digital ag. The colored blocks there in the middle are kind of define where the focus areas are. There's foundational AI, as there is in all of these AI institutes. Below that is this orange rectangle. So there's three pieces here. There's cyber infrastructure for AI. So it's cyber infrastructure in support of AI. And on the right of that is AI for cyber infrastructure for AI. So it's basically pushing AI into the cyber infrastructure, and then that cyber infrastructure is then in support of AI. So it's CI for AI for CI. So this isn't just cyber infrastructure in support of AI. It is novel ways in which AI pushes into the cyber infrastructure, and I think ChatGPT example that I gave is one of those. So in this context, and I talk about these kind of institutes, particularly like Icicle being one of the headwaters in research, because it's funded by the National Science Foundation. Again, I spent several years at the National Science Foundation. Because it's funded by a federal agency, there's an expectation of basic research that goes on. And that research is research that results in publications. And we all have, as we do our research, there's always a target for publications. There's also in this space the expectation that there's a translation into there's translation into products. So when one looks at this from the software point of view, and that would be the one dimension. I'm sorry, let me get the other dimension, which is the vertical dimension. When one is working in the context of such as this project, which is not unusual in the work that we're doing, there's software that's targeted to specific uses that may have, specifically within a digital ag problem, it's a particular trained model. But then there's also software where the intended use is generalized. You know, a new operating system is not for a specific problem. It is generalized across a range of uses. So the dimensions around which software is developed and the products of research are produced are in this quad chart, where in the upper right-hand corner, this is where you exactly know who the users are, you exactly know what the product is. That's wonderful. When you're in the earlier phase and your software hasn't gone through a translation phase to get there, which is it needs to be ready to use, it needs to get to that space, well then that software is in a form where it's supporting a paper. And the translation is how it gets from one form to the other. And then below that, in the lower quadrants are, well, that specific use is not necessarily known. It's a more generalized use. So this is the space in which this, and I would argue, cyber infrastructure research projects deal with this space in one way or another. And one of the conundrums is not everything, translation is an expensive process. Not everything is going to flow from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. It just won't. So how do you grapple with this? And one needs to grapple with this. So we are looking at this space from the point of view of democratization. So I won't go through this slide, but we started by thinking about AI ethics and how we contextualize AI ethics in the context of this institute. And we did our homework and we looked at what things are doing contextually. I won't go through this. But we did come up with the different categories, and I'll come back around to this, so I won't put a lot of time into this one. But this is kind of how we got to democratization. You know, we acknowledge the role of workforce development. We acknowledge the role of broadening participation in computing. We saw democratization as a key piece of ethics. We also see aspects of trustworthiness, privacy, fairness, and accountability as key pieces to ethics. And what we're seeing here is, well, okay, so the green is, well, this is how we're thinking about, I don't want to make this my main point because it's not my main point, so this is how we're thinking about this. So anyway, the takeaway from this point is we're thinking about democratization in the larger context of AI ethics and trying to come up with what can we do here to improve both ethics and democratization. So narrowing into democratization, what is democratizing AI? It's somewhat of a buzzword these days. But it is, more generally, who gets access to the technologies and what they do with them. If we look at within the context of the Icicle project, so Icicle's goal of democratizing AI is broad and just access to Icicle AI technologies, the developments of its AI technologies in a manner that's informed by those who will benefit or be affected by these technologies. And we are also further, which I won't put time into right now, we're still working on this, is basically using democratizing AI as a measurable objective. So we have metrics that are defined against it. We recognized early on that participation is key to democratizing, and what I want to bring up is the challenges that are inherent in that. Drawing on some work by Priddy in 1994, participation can take a number of forms. It can be passive, and you can see they range from empowered, least empowered to most empowered. They can be passive or coercive. They can be extractive, where I'm not listening to you, I'm extracting what I want to hear. It can be consultative in nature. It can be incentivized. It can be functional. It can be interactive. It can be self-mobilized. So what we desire to do, which I think is evident from in terms of empowering the particular participant, is you want to work lower in these participation levels. So you want participation that is interactive. It's two-way. It's self-mobilized in that there's a beneficiary on the receiving end of that participation. We acknowledge that. We see the importance of that. And where the challenge comes in is how one interprets participation when there's research involved. I'm going back to the quad chart. Participation makes a ton of sense in that upper right-hand quadrant. What does it mean in those other quadrants? And that's the basis of the message that I want to convey to you. So our conceptual framework around democratization, we're just drawing on literature, drawing on what's meaningful in the context of our particular project. There's different dimensions of democratization. One of these is democratization of use, and I apologize if this white on blue is not good for people. Democratization of use is to make the software, models, data, information, knowledge graphs is something we're focusing on, more accessible to a wider range of potential users. So expanding the people we reach out to with intentional reaching out to, not necessarily just big farms, but small farms as well. That's democratization of use. Democratization of AI development is the participatory piece, where a wider range of people contribute to the design and the development. So this isn't just extracting requirements from somebody. This is actually participation in the design itself. Democratization of AI benefit. All people benefit from AI, not just big and medium-sized tech companies. And here I would ask, when it's cyber infrastructure that you are developing, and I'll point to the EU. So the EU AI Act, which is in discussion with the member countries right now, and they're hoping to make law by the end of 2023, which is probably aggressive. It labels different levels of harm. So infrastructure, it categorizes as a high risk of harm. We're pushing AI into our infrastructure. What are the benefits? Are we talking about what those benefits are? And that's what that AI benefits. Again, those that benefit, those that contribute need to be those that benefit, and those benefits and risks need to be considered even in the infrastructure layer. And then finally, democratization of AI governance. And this is a representation of, well, first, how we're enacting. And right now we're interpreting this very narrowly to say, how do we act as a team with respect to embodying what democratization of AI is? So another thing that complicates the space we live in, and we live in a very complex space for those of you who are in the same space with me. I know we work in virtual teams. This is how we work. We love it. So cyber infrastructure research is most often conducted by large teams, largely academically oriented, mostly made up of students, staff, faculty, and postdocs, and we're highly distributed. So this is the setting. It's a very distributed setting that we all work in, and it's also a setting characterized by multiple goals. We're not all on the same page running toward the same objective. We've got different goals. Postdocs need papers, graduate students need to graduate, faculty need to get tenure. I mean, we've got all these various, we've got different institutions in the mix. So it makes it challenging. So when we're democratizing AI through this participatory research, which is a known technique for democratizing AI, we have issues in the context of this virtual teams and cyber infrastructure setting. You know, that upper right-hand corner, we got that one. We know who our users are. You know, we already have translated products. You know, we can harden them. We can make sure we've got participatory research, and we got all that. We know all that. That's all great, but that's only 1 out of 4. I know. What do we do about the rest? So we go over to the left, where it's now earlier in the research phase. This software is not necessarily going to go through a translational pipeline. It is supporting a paper. And you know what? That's okay. But now what? Now, there's participatory research may not make sense in that context. And then again, when we're dropping down, and I'll hustle on here, when we're dropping down, now we've got generalized software. So, okay, so are we going to bring somebody in who's a farmer and ask them to comment on the next version of Linux? Probably not. So anyway, these are the challenges. I'll move on. All right. So anyway, and I think I've got just a couple more slides here. So our solution here is multifaceted. It has to be multifaceted. So in that upper left-hand quadrant, there's absolutely a focus on the education and training of students, because those are our next generation, and those are the people who need the tools to think about harms and risks in the context of their research, even though their products may not make it into hardened, translatable software products. Education and training is applicable down below as well. The participatory research holds strongly in the upper right-hand quadrant. And then I would argue in that lower right-hand quadrant, where the solutions are generalized, that it's critically important that we engage users. And I don't even like the word users, but we engage people in empowered ways. So they have votes, they have voices, and they sit at tables and can influence decisions. So anyway, just the point I made that EU Act for Risks, infrastructure is considered something of high risk. It's something we absolutely have to bring attention to. And then final slide is, I am working on technology solutions here, and that is mostly in the accountability space that eases the task of harm assessment. I would argue also, and I don't think I had it in here, nope. I would argue also that if one is doing an assessment of harm, it actually is in here in that harm assessment arrow, that harm assessment needs to be done on that translation, in that translation pipeline, as things are translating into actual use. That is when that harm assessment is done. The work I'm doing in a technical perspective is to provide information that can be used during that time. Takeaway, I'll do one slide here, I'll leave it right here. Democratizing AI governance and cyber infrastructure research projects, we need to adopt a multi-pronged assessment that includes training, review process, automation, and I would also add engaged and empowered future users. And then finally, again, I think we need a little bit more consideration of, and I'll stop right here, a little bit more consideration of what we deploy and why. I think we need to step away from just, no, we just do the technology. We just throw it out there. Somebody else makes decisions about its use and its relevance. That, I think we need to embody that more as responsible researchers in cyber infrastructure. In rare cases, Britain will pay for new drugs only when their effectiveness is high relative to their prices. I've read something recently about ChatGPT and its energy consumption. at some point we need to say, no, really, our climate is more important here. It really is, And we need to be having those discussions, not waiting for publications or the media to have those. We need to be having those publications. We need to stand up and say, no, it's us. If we don't participate, how can we expect others to take that responsibility? I'll stop there. Thanks.